Welcome to Covendom, Season 6, Episode 1. This is our weekly podcast. Your hosts are myself, Brian Kane, Levi Rowland, and Ellie Barnes. Unfortunately, Ellie Barnes will not be with us for our first episode because she's in the mountains and has no Wi-Fi or reception. But she will be back next week, and we might give her extra work, Levi, so she can...
I'm down for it.
She can do two things instead of one. So we'll make her the star. So last week, our first guest was supposed to be Tracy Fresh. And am I still saying that? I never say names right.
Freshy. It's fine.
Freshy. Unfortunately, we had technical difficulties, which seems to happen to us at the beginning of every season because I think they put the stuff away and then they take it out and things go wrong, and we live in New Orleans. So she's going to come on for season 3. So our first guest tonight will be Michael Herkes. Michael Herkes is known as the Glam Witch, which is why I'm dressed so glamorously. You can't see my beautiful new piece here, but I wore all this for Michael. You can't let him down, Levi. He's the Glam Witch. So he wrote a book called The Glam Witch, and his newest book is Glamstrology. He's actually written a few books, and so I'm going to let him talk about that later in the show. But Michael also is a regular guest speaker at Herkes. He will be there this year. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, we should do an episode where we Glam Witch Levi, and we do a complete
could you imagine?
early makeover on you.
Could you imagine?
Make you look like a blossomy, like you could be a blouse. A blouse. That's
a blouse. Me not looking so dour all the
time. So anyway, special mentions. We do have Levi's going to be doing the news, but I just want to cover it. He'll cover it again. We have Herkes coming up, so we've got 3 episodes scheduled. So next up will be Papa Cap. And then we will have Tracy back on. So we're excited about that. And then we'll probably be taking a break during Herkes because we get pretty busy. But during Herkes, are you going to cover Herkes's thing there for us, Levi?
I can do the Herkes stuff, absolutely.
Okay. But we're going to definitely be mention the soiree and all that stuff. This is how I mommy dearest everyone. Anyway, so we're very excited. And Michael will be doing our ambush interview. Levi is going to do our news segment, and then I'm going to have a little occult demonstration for you. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Levi.
Hey, everybody. So I see all of your comments coming through if you're watching us through Facebook or YouTube. Watching us at Hex Education is the channel on YouTube. Give it a like and a subscribe. What Brian said, I want to reiterate. We have Herkes coming up August 9th through 11th here in New Orleans at the Bourbon Hotel. It is an incredible, magical event. There's tons of speakers. Michael Herkes will be there, our ambush interviewer for today, teaching. I'm teaching a class there. It's a great panel. You can find more information online. Tickets are still available. Before that, you can also find this on social media platforms. We're having a Alexandrian Grand Soiree, which is the coming together of 3 covens that are going to be present here in New Orleans. You can find the event space and everything online. We're going to be answering questions present for people who are curious, people who want to see. It reminds me of that ending of that fabulous made-for-TV Harvest Home with Bette Davis, where at the end she goes, "He came to see, so let him see." So if you want to see, come and see. But yeah, I'm doing our news for today, and I'm going to start with the fact that, as I'm sure we all have seen, Shannon Doherty passed away. She was very well known, an icon of late 90s and early aughts. She was on 90210. She was on Charmed, which I am currently watching for the first time. So yes, hail the traveler when it comes to Shannon Doherty. Love it or hate it, Charmed had an enormous influence on the growth of pop culture witchcraft, the introduction of Wicca to Middle America, and the explosion of people interested in it in that time period. Today, the 14th, is Karchi Puja in Tripura in India, which is a celebration of 14 specific deities tied to Mother Earth. You can look that up online, Charchi. These deities are all associated with the Mother Goddess, embodied as the Earth, and there are some incredible photographs of this festival. So if you're interested in that, you can look it up. It's a very, very cool festival going on in Tripura in India. Today is also the anniversary of the discovery of Machu Picchu, which I think is very cool. There's been an explosion of sort of Andean spirituality that came after that discovery. A lot of people are unaware that a lot of indigenous people, in the Andes Mountains have had to recover a lot of their history, and you can find some incredible information online of organizations doing this. A lot of it centers around the worship of Pachamama, Mother Earth, right? So it's a Mother Earth theme today. The final thing that I wanted to do as the occult news is going to seem a little out of left field, but I think it's important. If you've been following, we have been having some pretty insane political news in this country recently. And I think it's important to use every platform you have available to remind people to look at what's going on at your local election level. This is not an endorsement, left, right, anything like that. But a lot of these conversations that are going on right now will end up affecting people who label themselves witches, pagans, magical practitioners. Here in Louisiana, we just were told that all public schools must display the 10 Commandments. The state of Oklahoma has mandated that the Bible be taught in public schools. So do some research. Look into your local chapters of the ACLU if you need to, and other organizations, local or national, that fight for religious freedom. I hate to end on a sour note, but I think it's super important. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Brian.
Super disturbing, really, isn't it?
It is very alarming.
In any case, going on. So today we're going to have a occult demonstration, but it might not be what you think it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about candle magic.
What a voice, right? Brian.
Now we're going to start with a little bit of a history of candles, in how they were used and why we use them today, and how some of the original witches used them. Of course, as initiates, we do have our own private methods that I will not be sharing with you. But candles really come to us through a few places. I'm getting feedback on myself for some reason.
You sound good to me.
It went away. No, I was hearing myself, like, I don't know why. So anyway, candles, most historians believe were invented by the Romans. There are some people who, have speculated that the Egyptians had them prior. So the process of burning oiled lamps is very old. That's multicultural. But the candle that we have today definitely was either invented or very much made popular by pagan Romans. They were the ones who first took animal fat, dipping it in papyrus. They believe the Egyptians had beeswax candles. However, there's no proof that it was any older than the Romans. So whether the Romans, owned it like they did so many things, like maybe they didn't invent roads, but they made them better, so we attribute roads to them. That's a different story. But in any case, that's when it first started becoming used, usually around household shrines, not in the temples and household shrines. But it would later become popular, very, very popular within Christianity, probably very much due to Rome's influence. But we know that the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church and the early Alexandrian Church, they all used candles. There was a lot of cross-pollination at that time. And I'm going to focus primarily on the Catholics, but I encourage you to also look into the Greek Orthodox because it's very similar and has its own nuances. So the things that people who ascribe themselves as modern witches do have actually been being done by the Catholic Church for a very long time, and it is where we get it from, point blank. So in the old witchcraft stuff, it was fires. Whether you're talking about the Druids or the Germanics or the Anglo-Saxons, they didn't use candles. So yes, they burned oil, but most in rites, it was a fire, a bonfire, or what have you, a hearth fire, something like that would be used in its stead. So really, it's about fire and it being the focal point of energy, of power, right? So that's going to vary depending on what gods, goddesses, religions we're talking about. But when we're getting into the origins of witches using way too many candles for way too many wishes,
we do.
I'm going to say that I think we really, really did get that from the Catholics, and so did practitioners of voodoo and hoodoo and all of that sort of thing. It's all sort of this cross-pollination. So when you look at the Roman Catholic rite, first of all, it has to be a beeswax candle originally. Nowadays they sometimes accept paraffin and things like that, but the original belief was that it had to be a beeswax candle. Which is funny because that would have been probably one of the first, paraffin wasn't really a thing. The Romans' first candles outside of beeswax were made from animal fat. Yep. That's what they made them from. So The Catholics are the ones who devised, and the Greek Orthodox devised using colors with these candles. But more often, it would be the lanterns or the candle holders, because most people just had white candles or beeswax candles. They didn't have all these colored candles we have today. However, I do attribute the church to the first aspect of this that magicians would also pick up, because once again, cross-pollination, we have to remember a lot of the original magicians were Christian.
Oh, yeah.
So it was very easy. So you'll find that red was associated with the blood of Christ. White was associated with purity. Blue was associated with the Mother of God. Mm-hmm. Purple was associated with Lent. That's another thing, is a lot of times in the Catholic Church, the colors would be seasonal. So the candles and the colors would be seasonal and describe certain holidays or festivals in their symbology. So kind of reminds one of a correspondence you'd find in your average Llewellyn book, doesn't it? So now how about the original British witches? We did not combine color magic with candle magic in the early days, because we usually only had white candles. So the candle spells or what have you would be done by creating methods around the candle, or simply casting the spell using the candle as a focal point. But in most traditions, including Christianity, voodoo, hoodoo, and witchcraft, in a sense, the candle can be dressed. It can have certain things done to it. A very popular thing is oil, right? And who wants to guess what the most popular oil in all these traditions originally was? Well, if you guessed actually real olive oil, you were correct. Because once again, how do I point it? Get the natural.
He brought the bottle, everybody.
Yes, I did. I brought the whole bottle. Because I wanted to make this very hearth and home. The old witches would have a candle made out of beeswax, and they would have their oil that they had anyway. They didn't have an apothecary of rose oil and lavender. I mean, Cleopatra did, but not
the commoners probably not.
Some of the temples did, and they would have burned the oils in the oil lamps, wouldn't they have? So there's a lot of cross-pollination that goes on, to where, we've got the predecessor to the candle, which is fire. The Druids threw herbs into the fire versus lighting a candle. So candles became popular when we took things indoors, when rituals started becoming indoors.
Can't be having a bonfire in the house.
This candle. So we are going to do a little spell. The dogs are already barking. We're going to do a little spell for everyone here for the magical demonstration. So we've got a plain beeswax candle, and in the Catholic rite, it would be anointed with holy water and oil, and there actually is a prayer. You can look it up online. We're not going to be doing that one. We're just going to... Sorry, you can't see the whole thing. It's the way it is. So I want you all to focus on the light of the candle, right? And we're going to ask, glorious, shining Athena, wise wisdom one born from the crown of Zeus, bless all those who watch this podcast and participate, to open our hearts and our minds to wisdom, that we may go forth from this day containing a gift from thee. So mote it be.
So mote it be.
So olive oil was also very important because it's sacred to Athena, goddess of wisdom. So my point is, magic doesn't always have to be complicated. It doesn't need all these correspondences. And when we overcomplicate things like that, sometimes we don't even know where they came from. And Levi and I both probably practiced color magic in some way, shape, or form,
sure,
planetary or otherwise. But it is interesting to note that our predecessors early on did not in candles. They did it in hermetics and in other ways, but not with the candles themselves.
Of course.
Because light is all colors, isn't it? So anyway, blessed be Levi.
Blessed be.
So do you want to bring on
Yes. I'm going to bring on Michael. Hey, Michael.
Hello.
It's lovely to see you.
It's great to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's an absolute pleasure. So I have to ask, well, first, I would like you, if you wanted to add anything else about anything you have upcoming or something you want to let our audience know about, go ahead, give you some time for that.
Sure. So I'm very excited, to be coming to HexFest next month and see you all there and be presenting. I have 3 brand new workshops. So I'll be doing one, a guided meditation to go into Lilith's cave and work with the dark goddess. I'll be doing another class on Venus and Aphrodite and the 5 mysteries of desire. And another one that looks at the paradox between Lilith and Aphrodite and the connections between the two, that I've kind of noticed and grown to understand as a devotee of both of them. So I'm excited for that. And then in October, my 8th book comes out, Glamstrology, which I know you got to see a little preview of. And it's a great book on the combination of astrology and glamour magic. So how you can kind of create a unique personal presentation based off of 6 points in your natal chart. So I created a formula to kind of do that, and then also teach you, different ways to use glamour magic if you know other people's astrological signs to kind of maybe help either smooth out any kind of like differences that you might have, or if you wanted to cause a little chaos too, there's ways to do that. So I'm really excited for this one. It's a big full color book. There's wonderful illustrations in it. The head of FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology, so the head of fashion illustration did the illustrations in the book. So I'll be doing a lot of different promotions for it and a lot of different events. I'm hopefully looking to go on a book tour as well. So cool. Just stay tuned and watch my socials and my website, theglamwitch.com, for more info on that.
Yeah, I did actually get to see a sneak peek of Glamstrology, and not only is it full of the information that Michael just spoke about, but it's also just very interesting how it's laid out. It's just very cool. So it's definitely worth picking up. So I do have to ask.
In it for somebody else will. When Michael's speaking, I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I don't know what that's about, but maybe no one else.
If anybody else is, let me know in the comments and we will fix it. I'm not hearing any here. But if you're hearing it in the comments, let us know.
On my end, I don't know.
Yeah. Let us know, and we
I hear it with you too, Brian, so it could just be us.
Hopefully.
It could be a lag from where we are or something.
Yeah, there is a small lag, so sometimes it's very minuscule, but it will make you think that you're hearing somebody cut you off or whatever, but it's just the time.
Got people from 3 different states talking.
Yeah, we do. We're all in different states right now, by the way.
You plugged my book and I didn't know.
Huh?
Did you plug my book and I didn't notice?
Oh, no, I did not. When I was doing HexFest, also super exciting. Brian's book is coming out August 1st, The Religion of Witchcraft, which I also am in the current stages of finishing up a blurb for as well. It's a beautiful work on the religiosity of craft, touching on history, practice, just everything that comes from the beautiful and incredible revolution that was the birth of religious witchcraft, which we all...
And interviews in it by these 2 gentlemen.
Yes.
So both of them are in my book.
I'm excited.
And if you are at HexFest, me and Michael and Levi can all be there to sign our new books because they're all there.
Yes.
We'll all be there on the table and we'll be there with autographs. So if you're cool and you like Southern Swamp Magic, you should be there.
You should.
Magical boat ride.
I have to ask though.
What is it?
Yes, what is it? What's our questions today?
Well, I'm sure it's not a shocker for anyone, but the subject is going to be glamour magic.
Down.
So the very first question I have is, so in Scotland during the early 1700s, the word glamour was first coined and referred to as a magic spell. How has this concept of glamour magic evolved from its traditional term through folklore and modern interpretations, and what implications does this have for contemporary practitioners?
Ooh, the development of glamour. Brian, do you want to go first? Or?
Well, yes. I mean, all these words, we can find them going back in antiquity, grimoire, grammar, glamour, all these things. It's very interesting. I don't know if Michael knows this, but I did a couple workshops on glamour magic when we first started HexFest years and years ago. And so I am interested in the subject, and it's because Glamour was often associated with fairy magic as well. Putting on a glamour, changing perception, fascinating someone. So I think that we, do it in our lives. Some of us do it more naturally than others, Levi, but we do it in our lives anyway. And as witches, obviously, we do have methods and things like that we talk about on the inside. But for the most part, I think this topic really lives in folklore. I feel like it really does live in the magic of the people and in the fairy tales and the stories. And so I love it being a topic. It is powerful and can be dangerous, though. So although it sounds like something that would just be butterflies and Tinkerbell, in fact, it can be used for some rather diabolical purposes, can't it? It reminds one of the sirens singing the sailors into the sea, So I think it's a delicious word that reminds us how magical magic can be, So do I think it's on the tip of modern practitioners' tongues? No, I don't. I think it's a subject that isn't actually talked about a whole lot in comparison to lighting candles. It's going to be my answer.
Yeah. I think that what fascinates me about glamour magic in general is this idea that I think it's Kismet, you mentioned fairy tales. So that's where my mind goes, Michael, is like the image that comes from our Western canon of fairy tales, right? The beautiful queen, the magic mirror, right? The sorceress who can change her form at will and look differently and influence people. It's a huge, huge image in the Western canon of folklore. And I think I agree with Brian that it can be really dangerous, though, because it's always the symbol of the power of self-projection, but also illusion, right? So it's like this dance between who are you really and who do you want to be and who do you want people to think you are. And I think it can be difficult to juggle those. Sometimes, like, which one is the real you, right? Is it the projection? Is it the self? Is it the one that they see,
Levi, you got to fake it to make it.
Exactly. I mean, that's magic, right? That's magic. But I also think,
I literally have said that,
yes,
too,
it
in my
is
book
magic.
Glamour, so.
Michael, you're right. It's magic. But I also think what I like about it is there's different kinds of glamour, right? Like, there's dark glamour. There are people who can kind of bowl you over because they're intense. I think, to pull an example to tie this into Brian and I's tradition, I think Alex was quite gifted at this. I think he was able to just charm people in ways that were almost alarming sometimes, like when you look at the interviews and whatnot. I think he had a great power of persuasion and charisma. And I think a lot of the elders of witchcraft did. Gerald Gardner, I mean, my God, you watch any interview with him, he's just you're drawn into him in some level. So yeah, I do think it's
glam magic, though. That was something else.
It was, but see, that's my point, though. It can be different. Some people are glamorous. Like, think about like style icons in the U.S. You have the
really is a bit of glamour magic, really, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
The hair and the
But we can all think of style icons who were dark, though. Who were,
of course.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't all about the beauty of Hollywood necessarily. It could also be people who were. I mean, think about Grey Gardens. They became style icons, for God's sakes. It's like there's glamour even in that. So yeah. I think it's definitely part and parcel of what the Western witchcraft tradition, for sure.
Fabulous answers, boys. All right, number 2. How can practitioners of glamour magic address the potentially subvert societal beauty standards and expectations while still working within the realms of attraction and influence?
Subversion.
Depends on who your target is.
True.
I think, I'm not always what someone would consider to be currently politically correct. However, I will say that I've always sort of played with a little bit of gender bending. I don't know if that's even an okay thing to say anymore. So I've always identified as male, but I definitely enjoy playing with the luminous androgyny that, that I can bring out at times. Like, I think you can be a identifying male and still enjoy being pretty. And even be a blouse, Levi. You can be a blouse.
I could get a blouse, everybody. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Otherwise, you could be a very feminine woman who sometimes wants to butch it up, you know. So I think that just depends on the human being. Some people have a natural gift to shift their shape, you know, and some people don't. I think as a modern construct, glamour magic could be a tool to socialize sexual norms. So I think that that's an interesting way of looking at it. Probably happened in, you know, it did in fairy tales even happen that way, you know, to where you would have, or even the witch trials, where you would have the story of the devil appearing as a beautiful woman and then the queen of fairy, you know, and shape-shifting being a huge part of folklore. So I think in the sense that the ability to magically shapeshift when used benevolently can be a teaching tool, you know.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if I'm really answering the question well, but that's my answer.
I think witchcraft is inherently subversive. Brian and I have talked before about this idea that's really hard for some people to face, which is witchcraft is something that comes to be under Christendom, right? We were not witches before the rise of Christianity. We would have been priests or priestesses of our deities. We would have been seers or oracles or whatever in what has come to be called the pagan times or whatever, pre-Christian times. Witchcraft starts as a subversion, right? You know, it is rooted in it deeply. We reject, you know, the power of the monarchy of the white Christ and his disciples. You know, it's like there's a delicious rebellion in that. And I think one of the things I've been thinking about recently is subversion depends on where you're at, though, Michael. So, like, in a room full of witches, I am not subversive, right? I come off as a prude, even. But I have it is true. But, you know, in the world outside of this circle, like at my day job or whatever, I am not the prude. No. I am all in black. Have witchy tattoos. I'm wearing a silver ankh. Like, you know, Ted from accounting is going to be like, something weird is going on over there. So I think there's this power that you have, and this is going to sound a little lovey-dovey, but I don't care. I'm in a lovey-dovey mood. I like sometimes portraying myself subversively through the way I dress or the way I talk or what I wear or the jewelry I wear, because what I have discovered is it gives permission to people who are hungry for something different to be more honest. Like the amount of conversations, if you wear a pentacle or if you wear an ankh or if you have witchy tattoos, but you're in a very sort of straight setting, right? Or Christian environment, the amount of people who will like open up to you and be like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that too, but you know, I didn't know about this space being okay to do that in. So that's kind of a cool subversion you can do. If you're the village witch in a village full of Karens, then the cool people will find you. And I think there's like, that's some potent magic. It's why Laurie Cabot dresses the way she does. It's why I think that you have all these fabulous, glamorous images of Alex and Maxine and Gerald, and why Doreen wore capes. You know, it's like, because you're the village witch. They need to know who you are, right? So
that's why I wear my caftans.
Yeah, people know. There he is. There's the glam witch over there. Like
that cartoon or the book that turned it's what's the point of being a witch if you don't look like one? I can't think what the name of this right now.
Oh, that Lori.
Yeah, who was that? I do remember hearing that though. What book was that?
Yeah. It's a series of books. I can't think of who it's called right now. Christian would know.
We'll look it up later. All right. So the next one I have is, how do you reconcile the use of glamour magic with the principle of authenticity in witchcraft? And on that note, what are the potential consequences of long-term use of glamour magic on an individual's identity and relationships?
Well, I think that although all forms of magic can be adapted, learned, or taught, however you want to describe it, I personally believe that glamour magic is almost something that's, and this is against my normal way of saying things, but I think it sort of comes a bit naturally to some people, you know, and it's kind of a difficult thing to fully adapt if you don't already have it, you know, because it is about shape-shifting, really. So a natural shapeshifter is either going to be an artist of sorts, and that doesn't matter whether it's painting, sculpting, poetry. There's always a dynamic to them because they want to create, and so their glamour comes out of their ability to create the world around them and use themselves as a tapestry. The other kind is the little goblin pathological liar types, and they cannot help themselves, and they're already destructive, and so it's very easy to spot the difference. So when you get like a cult leader who's using people, that is that person. But they still have a natural gift. Like, you don't just like learn to be a cult leader. Like, you have to already be a person who's able to sort of bend people to your will. And I mean, the CIA studies this, like, this is just a true phenomenon. Certain personality types of people who are more dominant. I think that most of the time we think of glamour magic, we don't think about those sorts of personalities. We think of the Alexanders, who was bending the world around him and enchanting people, with his world, with his life. So I don't know if I've lost the idea of the question, but
no, I like it.
Yeah, I think it works. It's good. Great
I
answer.
definitely feel like it's, once again, can be used for positive or negative, just like anything else, but I don't really think it's something. Can you overuse it? Yes, if you're that diabolical person. But in my opinion, if you're already that diabolical person, if you're diabolical enough to be that person, there's probably no fixing you without tons of therapy and you getting involved in the work, which rarely happens when you're talking about someone who's that sociopathic. But I think people who are natural, who do it creatively, they get it out by creating beauty in the world. They're not using it for negative reasons.
Yeah.
So that's my idea of it. I think it's almost like inherent in you to begin with, whether you're going to use it positively or negatively. If that makes sense. It's not my normal standing on magic, but in this case, I think it is.
I think I agree with you. That is one of the things that's hard to teach. I mean, I don't know if you can make somebody charismatic, right? It's like it's like we've all met some people. You can learn, I guess, but it's hard.
You can become better at it.
Yeah. But some people are just absolutely gifted. I think, what do the children say nowadays? The Riz, right? I think I would add that now that we've mentioned fairy tales, for some reason they're on my mind. And I think there's a lot of folklore around this idea of anyone who engages in transformation, which glamour is a form of transformation, right? There's a danger that if it's not coming from authentic self, then you will lose yourself, right? You'll forget who you are. There's lots of folklore, about this, about like I was an animal for a witch was an animal for too long, and then she just becomes the animal because she's lost her sense of self or whatever. I think it's very easy in this world in particular to lose yourself in a persona. But I think I would add that that's common in almost every religion. I'm guessing everybody on this call has met someone who is a Christian, and their entire sort of personal image, the jewelry they wear, the quotes they say, the movies they watch, revolve around Christianity, but deep down they're rotten to the core, right? It's like there's no honesty. It's a projection. And so, I think I would take Brian's point about positive or negative, basically, and make it sort of psychoanalytic. If you're using glamour to project yourself, because you want to be something that you're hungry for, that's creative, that's personal, that's rooted in your authentic self, then it's going to have beautiful results. But I think there's a danger sometimes. Some people I've met who are really gifted at being charismatic, they almost become mimics. And they will take on the personality and project the personality of the people they're around. And they really, I'm sure we've all met people like this. I mean, come on, the gays are like so guilty of this. Like, you put them in a group and they just become the version of whatever's around them. I mean, we've all met these people.
Mimicking is not the same as knowing.
It's like mimicking is like such a thing, though, where it's like people who are really gifted, like they just pick it up with. So I think it's probably something you want to do with a little bit of self-searching. Like, you should do some soul searching.
I love that. I agree.
I mean, there's someone using their panties to make themselves feel sexier. Yeah. And trying to morph into a different entity. Yeah.
Correct.
Depends on the panties,
some fun panties.
So how would you reconcile the potential manipulative aspects of glamour magic with personal ethics and the concept of free will? What potential consequences, both positive and negative, might arise from the widespread use of glamour magic in society? And in what ways can practitioners responsibly wield this power?
Well, I have to say, I don't really practice free will. It's not really a part of my concept. I think we all inherently have free will. So the free will I practice is my own free will, right? And my own free will and my ethics give me a guideline for any acts in my life. So my morals and my ethics are not situational to whether it's magical or mundane. So using cursing as an example, and we'll just go straight for the death curse, because that's what they all do on the internet, right? Like a curse is they want to kill someone, which is very bizarre to me. But if I wanted to kill someone, it would be the same moral to me as if I was going to shoot them with a gun. If I believe that my curse is actually going to kill them, I'm doing the same thing as if I shot them with a gun. So there's no separation there. There's no hiding behind it. I think most of these people just don't believe it's really going to work. So therefore they feel safe doing it, and they're just being rageful. I think glamour magic, it's once again how you use it. If you use something unethically, I do think if you're generating negative things into the world, you're generating negative things into your world. And it's about what kind of entity you want to be in the cycle you are currently in, and I believe that we can get caught in negative cycles, and that we're trying to find, we're trying to learn, and we're trying to grow. And so for me, I approached glamour magic when I discussed it publicly as really fun stuff for the girls, because I think it's okay to have fun with magic. I didn't talk about manipulating people, but it certainly can be used so that free will, in the belief in free will, it's already there. Like everyone has free will. There's people who are oppressors and dominators who try to, control people. I'm against that. But magically speaking, because I practice my magic in secret, I'm generally speaking not asking for consent. However, I practice good magic, positive magic, healing, protection. When it comes to something like love, it would be bringing love into someone's life, not bringing a person into their life. You're not binding someone there. So, or allowing them to love themselves so that maybe someone else will too. So if you're practicing any kind of magic from a positive place, you can't do any wrong. And you can get anything you want from a positive place. Even protection. You just say, I don't want that in my space. May it be blessed very far away from me. And so you don't have to approach things negatively. Glamour magic, I think, because it, the way that I perceive it, or the way that it's perceived through history, is very instinctual, and it tends to come from an entity, be it a witch or fairy or whatever it is in the story. And as a magic, yes, originally it kind of just meant to spell, didn't it? But, it's come on to have a connotation about really manipulating reality and perception of reality, or fascinating people. I like that word, fascination.
It is a good word.
Anyway, that's my answer.
Love it.
Ethics, the ethics of glamour. I think this is very different in the magical community than it is in the wider world. I don't think that they're necessarily the same. I think glamour in the secular world can get weird, because it can start being about things like a culture where you're not allowed to age anymore, or a culture where young girls are shamed relentlessly for, a sort of illusory form of beauty. And so I think that's one thing. And then the use of personal style as a form of magic, or engaging the body, engaging beauty, is different. I think it all, is going to burn down to intent, right? What are you using it for? Mm-hmm. But I will say, I don't think there's anything inherently evil about using a look or a little bit of a charisma to get ahead. I just don't. I mean, if you've got it, flaunt it.
I don't think there's anything evil with not aging.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, if you've got it, flaunt it. I mean, do what you got to do. This is a rough life, guys. I
know.
And I think everybody has, but I think you can find your own form of glamour. For me, it's been humor. Like my whole life, that's been like such an ability for me to, integrate myself, fascinate people, disarm people. It's so easy. Like if somebody's trying
on me, if someone can make me laugh, I'm already there. I'm just like, it works.
So I think that's the ethical boundary. I think manipulation is this is one place where we're going to get into touchy topics, because that's a divide in the magical community between people who think that it's every person for themselves and do what you got to do, and then other people who believe that, the great work requires an ethical commitment. My tradition teaches that the great work requires an ethical commitment, right? We have ethics in the craft, and they're pretty strict. And I like that.
Compared to not having any.
Yeah, compared to not having any. We're not strict compared to like a Roman Catholic, but or a Southern Baptist. But yeah, no, for me, I absolutely do think that.
That's why I tell people on the internet with fridge art.
Like, I would not use glamour to manipulate somebody into, for example, believing a lie, right? Or I wouldn't use it to force somebody to do something that they really have expressed they didn't want to do in the first place. I just don't like that. I'm not saying that it's evil. I'm not saying it's just not the way I work. Like, I'm not interested in warping people's desires that way. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily think it's always bad. It's very situational. But for me, I'm a little stricter about it, I think.
Right. So in what ways does social media serve as a modern platform for glamour magic? And how can practitioners navigate their considerations of that in the context of how they present themselves? Additionally, how do you think the rise of AI and augmented reality technologies might influence or become incorporated into future magical practices?
Oof.
Well, for the first part, I have a very, I don't even want to say love-hate relationship with social media, but I'm going to say that for lack of a better term. So obviously I use it. We've got things like Covendom that we're doing here that I'm, doing because I believe in, if you're going to participate in public teaching or public conversation, you've got to put out the authentic content yourself or not complain. It's kind of like, people who complain about who's president, but they didn't vote. You didn't vote, you don't get to complain. So part of Covendom is us, shining a beacon out, saying, this is what we do. We are here, right? So that certainly has aspects of it that could be, qualified as a glamour. One of the things that I have learned in my time as a public witch is that a picture is worth 1,000 words if it's a good picture. And as a wise founding member of our tradition once said, we're Alexandrians. We know all the best angles, and that's why you'll find a lot of Gardnerians will use our photos in conversations about their craft, because we do know all the best angles. So certainly any kind of public speaking or public activities, imagery does matter. We are in an age to where people are being trained to be able to take in very limited content. They're not this will not be remembered as the generation of intellectuals. They like their content in very small. I know I sound like a mean old gay right here, but it's true. I should say queen. They take it in small things. One thing they can take in is an imagery. And if the imagery is enticing to them, maybe they'll read a paragraph or two, and so I think it has its value, and we're in an ever shifting, it'll come around again. We're going to have a generation who hates social media and wants to read books. It all comes around again. So I think, where I'd say buyer beware is you do have to eventually look into the content. I do get a little cross sometimes when I see this tween girl who does not know a thing about witchcraft. And I can listen to her talk for 10 minutes and realize she knows nothing about it. And she can barely do the makeup in her makeup tutorial. But somehow she has 150,000 million people. So I'm like, well, she's got something going for her. Kudos to you, girl. So I appreciate that. But it's, it just depends on where you're coming from. So sometimes a glamour is all people are going for, and I say that glamour is fine, but in the cautionary tale of glamour, the illusion eventually shatters. And then you have to deal with the reality of the situation, as Levi says I'm known to say.
You say it a lot. You do say it a lot.
So an illusion is an illusion. Always remember that. Yeah.
Social media. I think I'm an elder millennial. And so I came in.
Sorry, about the AI part.
I came in late. I came in late, right, to social media. So I'm not one of the. I'm not young. So
You're a baby.
To you, I have mixed feelings about it.
Besides, you're an old man eating licorice, but you're a baby.
I do. I love a bag of black licorice in an old movie.
Yes.
I mean, but let's be honest. Old movies had great glamour. It's like you want to talk about
yes,
Joan
they
Crawford.
do.
I think I would love to find a way for social media to have more authenticity. I'm very alarmed by its weaponization right now politically. I think you know who the real masters of glamour magic are right now? I'm not so sure it's exactly, it's Russian bots. I'm not so sure that it's witches, right?
No.
So I'm alarmed that the people who seem
Only
to have
the corporate witches, they're good at it.
Sure, but the people who have mastered this magic, Michael, are bad actors. They're bad witches, right? You know, it's like the villains have taken control of the spell book at this point. And that's what scares me, is like the wrong kind of magicians are working the rights at this point. And so that it does scare me a little bit, especially with AI and deep fakes. You know, it's like the ability to manipulate reality on a level that we as witches could not even hold a candle to. I don't care how powerful you are, you know, how many circles you cast or grimoires you own. The ability for, you know, entire nations when they're coming together to do this stuff is just mind-blowing, and what it can do to public opinion. So that, I think it's actually kind of, again, to go back to fairy tales, like we should be a little alarmed by how powerful the glamour has gotten. You know, it's like I think the glamour of social media is one of the most powerful forms of glamour magic ever cast in the history of the world. You know, everyone can be whoever they want to be now. It's like, you know, it's like you can use AI or filters or whatever, and you can just be anybody. And I think without training, it's like, you know, when you talk about, because I've read your books, Michael, you know, when you talk about glamour, you're pairing it with soul searching. You know what I mean? Like, you know, there's authenticity there. I don't know whether or not the other, you know, a lot of people on social media are doing that authenticity work. And so it becomes a trap.
They're not.
It's like it becomes a trap. And so what you portray on social media becomes like, it's like very picture of Dorian Gray, right? You know, the image of you on social media stays young and happy, and then the real you is just wilting in the background. But yeah, it's like, now that I think about it, I'm glad you asked this question, because it's almost like the perfect question to talk about glamour magic, because this is the real like consequences of it. So
manipulating empires, countries. I mean, isn't the Catholic Church has been really good at glamour magic for a very long time?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother question though. Wear the dress, burn the incense. I mean, that's a whole type of glamour too, right? You know. But yeah, so that's my thought. Is like I participate in it, but I think it has to be paired with some sense of authenticity, or you're going to end up in a bad place.
I agree. Second to last question. What are your thoughts on the classification of glamour as an advanced magical technique? Does its omnipresence in everyday life make it more accessible or more complex? And with that being said, do you think that this is something that witches should become more familiar with? Like Brian had even kind of mentioned earlier, like candle magic, green magic, crystal magic, those other types of magic.
Well, I definitely, you know, in witchcraft, we have our own magical systems. You know, and the occult has its own magical systems, right? Glamour magic as a topic exists in folk magic. You know, it exists in folk magic. Certainly you can find it and when I say folk magic, just so everyone understands, that to me means the magic of the people. You know, and it's lots of different kinds of people. It was in every culture around the world. It's not a demeaning statement by any means whatsoever. Some of this survived through the classical works and the highly educated people who were able to read the classical works and have access to the classical works. And then the rest of it survived on that farm, you know, so in those stories, right? So I think it exists in the farm and in the stories, and so a lot of the work, some modern witches have brought the topic back. It was mentioned by the classics. I think it was Pericles that speaks about fascination and things like that. I think I've got that right, Levi. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'd have to check.
So it's really there. It's been in our history, but it's what does it mean, right? So magic, by its very nature, is manipulation, right? You're manipulating the forces of the universe, for whatever ends you're doing it for. The idea is whether you're asking God to do it for you, Goddess to do it for you, you're doing it yourself, you're asking the elves to do it, you're trying to create change. Glamour magic is a nuance to that in our minds now, the way I interpret it, which usually has to do with perception, beauty, illusion, for whatever the method is, right? So I definitely, I don't consider it advanced, and I don't consider it basic, because I don't think there's such a thing in magic as advanced and basic. I think that's one of the fallacies, because if you learn the basics of an actual magical craft, making it advanced is by developing it, by developing a skill in it. No one can teach you anything advanced. You have to take a basic formula and advance it yourself within you. And I still have a superstitious idea which I said it's not normal, that things like fascination and glamour magic, I don't think they're for everyone. I don't think everyone has the goods for it. However, I think it's okay to make it accessible to people, because there are things everyone can do. And once again, it's not about gatekeeping glamour magic, because I don't think it's really something that it's something. What I find in value of your topic is the fact that you talk about it, which is why I did it a couple of times. Because I think it's a very fascinating subject, and so you're talking about it and you've made it a part of your path. So I'm going to, I've seen you walking around in fur coats and giant pink witch hats. So obviously you've really tried, working with your ideas about this. And for yourself, you've probably taken a practice that for you started out very basic and has become advanced now, because you've thought about it so much, you've done it so much, you've implied it so much. So I think advanced is really about applying applying something and becoming a master of it through practice. That's my idea of any kind of magic, really. So I don't think any one magic follows a different system, but then that system of development is what I mean by that. It's all practice, like playing music, or whatever else you're going to do. However, like I said, I have a bit of a superstition surrounding that, and that's probably because for me, it enters into the world of fairy. And the one time, Levi, I can tell you, I'll be very classical about everything.
And not to fae.
But then you get into the fairies, and that's when you see a different side of Brian Kane. I don't talk about it very much, but
Thorne Mooney has this thing she used to do when she was on some of her older YouTube videos, where she would say, "What's your woo?" Which is what's your one topic where you don't care about the sources, you just have these beliefs, and so the fae are your woo.
I love it.
Yeah, I loved that idea. What's your woo?
Witchcraft is not in the blood.
Yeah,
I am part fairy.
Exactly. Do I think witches should know more about it? I think, I'll say this. How many times have we been in a situation and you're out with somebody and you've got one of those friends who is just not very self-aware? We know these people, right? They can be very sweet, but they just have no awareness. God bless them. They're just going through life on a whim and a prayer.
I'm thinking of a few right now.
Yeah. And they get manipulated. They're always with the wrong partner. They're always so easily lied to. And they're like, no, he's coming. He told me, he texted. It's like we all just, it's like, he loves me. I swear he does. And we're like, oh, Debbie, no, he doesn't. So I think that's something that we all need to, I think we all need to be a little bit more educated about social cues. The COVID pandemic and being online so much has I get this feeling sometimes that, especially amongst younger generations, social cues are just eroding at, such a rapid pace. And it's much easier to be fascinated or to be the victim of bad glamour magic if you're not aware of, how are people acting? How are they talking to you? Do they want something from you? So I do think we need to be educated on that, right? On the defense of it. I do have to say I kind of agree with Brian on one thing, which is I am really loath to say anything is inherent. You know, it's like it's just a pet peeve of mine. You know, as a former teacher, I just believe, you know, we can learn anything, right? You know, it's my natural belief.
But you're still a teacher.
Yeah, true. But when I was like a secular teacher, but there are some people who are just really good at this. They're just really, really good at this. And when they're good people, they tend to like run NGOs or write books on witchcraft for others and teach classes like Michael. But if they're wicked, they're real wicked. You know what I mean? Like wicked on a whole nother level. So I think one of the things we can do when it comes to like advanced practice, like you're asking about Michael or anything like that, is just as teachers, make sure that our students are aware. Like
and able to perceive past illusions.
Yeah.
You know, like say, look for the content in the person or the thing. You know, like what is actually the heart of what's actually happening here? What's the motivation? What are they doing? What are they doing it for? Are they a good person? You know, are they a bad person? You know, I think it just don't fall for the illusion, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the thing we can teach people.
Yeah.
You know, you can know it's an illusion and still enjoy it.
It's true. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. And then for the end, you know, turn it more personal to each of you. Can you share how you either have in the past or currently, you know, might use glamour magic?
Ooh.
Well, most people don't know this, but I'm actually 75 years old.
Good job. Good glamour.
The blood of infants. Don't be proud. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Michael, he's the bad fairy tale character, the one that's like, she had to die so I could be beautiful forever.
I suppose, you know, I suppose the main way I'd say that I use it is creating beauty around me, you know, and it's a thought can become reality, and it doesn't always take money to do that. You know, that's what people don't realize, you know. So if I flip my thing up, you're going to see my ceiling. So this is the living room here in Salem, and those are replicas of the stars of Nui. It was just a thought, and then one day it was there. You know, that's a kind of glamour magic, you know, in a way, but it's the kind that creates, you know. And then, you know, I suppose I might use it to capture someone's attention when I really need to get a point across. But that's as dark as we go, mostly. All right. That's what I am saying. And I'm 75 years old.
I think for me, it really is rooted in humor and projecting a version of myself for the situation. I think that, you know, as sort of like down on myself as like, you know, I'm a very self-deprecating person, but I do think I'm very good at in social butterfly situations about sort of like getting people on board with something. And I tend to do that either through intense humor, or you can kind of, if you're really gifted, and I do think this is a form of glamour magic, whether it's ethical or not, but a sort of like kind of bowl someone over, like with facts or ideas, you know what I mean? To be the one that's talking the most, or the one that's talking in the right way, or like saying the right thing.
You make things up.
Exactly.
Me and Ellie call you out.
But that's a form of glamour.
He's so used to people just believing him. Sometimes he'll just make something up. And
but if I get him to believe it, then that's magic, right? Like,
exactly. That's a glamour.
Yeah, it's a glamour. I get them to think that I know what I'm talking about.
Not that he's coming out with a lie. It's that he's coming up with something he knows might be true.
Yes. Yeah, I don't want to lie.
Yeah.
He does it with such confidence that most people just think it's absolutely true. However, I was his teacher, so I'm a little more skeptical.
Yeah, that's true. But I will say I do forms of that. I think that you're projecting yourself. It is magical. What do you think
I do, Levi? What do I do? Because I've done it to you. I know I have, sure. What do I do? I know what you do, but what do I do?
It depends on the situation and who you're around. It's different in a circle or with initiates for you than it is in public. I think sometimes you use intensity but like pulled out of nowhere. So like it'll be like a very light mood, Or like some things like everybody's laughing and then it's immediately like this, like, and then you just start reciting one of Doreen's poems, holding a chalice of wine with the candle, you know, the whole look, like, which is magic, right? You know, it's like a form of being overwhelming, but it's very effective. You know, it kind of jars people.
Well, yeah, sometimes if you can shift the atmosphere somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
That's,
I also think I love like a sort of bombastic form of glamour magic where it's like you show up and you just, and I say this, I know this is a somewhat ableist term, but I mean it in a very particular way. You're the craziest one in the room, right? Like,
well, we know that's never you and I.
But there's a form of magic to that too.
Who it is, and it's watching.
You know, it's kind of like how certain Tibetan masters would call it crazy wisdom, right? Where that's a form of glamour too. It's like a very Merlin cracked kind of mystic, and you can get a lot of traction with that too. I've done that before too, where I've just been like, over the top, you know, with poetry or prayer or whatever in circle. But yeah, I would say those are my favorite ones. I think there's also a form of glamour that we haven't talked about, Michael, that I used to do. I don't do as much anymore, but some of the most successful people I've ever known who use something I would call glamour magic are people who are very quiet. And they cast this spell that almost makes everyone forget they're in the room. And they're like flies on the wall, and oh no, not me. I'm just over here. I'm just observing. And those people are often
all the information.
Yeah, they have all the information.
All of it.
Like they are the Lipton factory of tea. You know,
I always have one of those around.
It's like that's a form of glamour too, though, to make yourself invisible.
It is, and people kind of forget that because they kind of, I think when they hear glamour, they're so focused on attraction, but it's also very much on, you know, invisibility and deflecting and that as well.
And those people are powerful because they're always in the right room at the right time, hearing like exactly what they needed to. Like those people, sometimes the introvert in your group is the one that's going to take over the group eventually. Like, you know, the calls are coming from inside the house. So I want to let our viewers know. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say, Michael?
I was going to say thank you. That concludes the 7 questions.
Thank you. I love those
that
questions.
I ambushed you with.
So we want to go ahead and open up for questions. Levi will handle the questions because me and Michael won't be able to hear them, so he'll read them to us. Cool. Or you call in, he'll tell you what they're saying because we don't get to hear them. I don't know if that'll ever change. And then we'll all sort of answer the questions. So just call us in with group questions. Michael's new book, once again, is Glamstrology, which tell us what Glamstrology is about. Well, Levi's cycling through questions or phone calls.
Yes, I'll go through your calls.
Of course. So I fused together the words glamour and astrology to create Glamstrology. And I created this formula that I had never seen talked about before, but I got into thinking about, you know, just the idea too that, you know, I always say that anyone that's familiar with tarot reading, like a card could mean one thing, but if you put it in a spread with everything, that interpretation of it changes. And so much in astrology, we kind of get lost, or I think the average person gets lost on the sun signs. But we have all of these different planets and placements, and depending on how it all comes together, that can change things. And so there's also this kind of, I'm seeing more and more things online of like, oh, you know, if you're an Aries, just like this. Some people might not agree with that because they might have a weird Aries placement or something along those lines. So my Glamstrology formula, it's taking your sun sign, your Venus sign, because Venus is, or let me back the bus up, your sun sign is about your personality. It's your kind of identity in this life. So that's going to influence in one way. And your Venus sign is connected to Venus, the planet of love and beauty. So that's very your aesthetic area. That's your relationship to beauty, how you appreciate beauty in the world. Then you have your Neptune. Neptune is the planet of illusions and glamour, so where you can kind of get really high glamour up there, makeup and things like that. And then we look at your first house or your ascendant, because that's kind of what showcases your first house of identity. So that can kind of explain the types of clothing that you feel comfortable in. And your second house is kind of your resource house. So that might be how you shop and how you style yourself and see value in things. And then lastly is your 10th house, your midheaven. That's your public image. So that is your innate ability to glamour. That's the sign that you can innately showcase to the world. And so if you kind of learn how to put it all together, in the little formula that I present to you, you end up creating a powerful astrological glamour for yourself.
Very cool. I also wanted to remind everyone, you can ask questions through comments. I'm actually siphoning through them now, and I'm going to ask a few for the panel. If you want to call in, though, we love calls. 309-463-3377 or 309-GODDESS, as in Mother Goddess. So if you want to call in, we love calls. If you want to do it in the comments, that's okay, too. I also wanted to let you know, my Venus and midheaven are both in Gemini. So, fun fact, I'm duplicitous. No, I'm kidding. I'm duplicitous.
I have a Gemini midheaven too. So.
Yeah. Well, it worked for me because I worked in languages for a long time, so it kind of fit. So, Brian, I think you're muted. There you go.
I muted myself because when Michael was talking, I was worried that I was causing the feedback because I have an open mic here. So.
Oh, okay.
So I just mute, but it wasn't changing anything, so I don't think that's what it was. I don't know any of mine. I've got a chart that Ellie made for me. In fact, Michael was looking at it last Hexfest party that we were having.
Yes, I know you're a Taurus sun.
Taurus, Virgo rising, Cancer moon, but I don't remember any of the other stuff ever.
Because I also have the Virgo rising and I have a Taurus Venus. So
I know I'm going to ask a question from the comments. I want to get the viewers involved, but I do, before I do that, I have to say, I love what you just said, Michael, and I want to hammer it home to people who are watching in multiple traditional forms of astrology. Cause like whether you're hyper traditionalist or modern, your sun sign is not the be all end all of your natal chart. I love that you brought that up. I'm so glad that that you wrote about that. I remember seeing it when I looked at Glamour. It's such an important thing. Like, for example, I am a Cancer, but my moon is in Capricorn, which is detriment. It's a terrible place for the moon to be, and it's in perfect opposition to the sun. So I'm not very Cancerian. I'm not your mom. You know what I mean? Like I'm not bringing snacks for the group. You know. So like, it's just I love that you brought that up. So here's a really good question. Do you from Wicked Witch? Are you using sidereal astrology, sort of like Vedic, Michael, or do you like the traditional, like tropical?
Tropical.
Yeah. And Brian, we use that in craft too when we talk about it.
Well, I'm not really an astrologist, but I tend to, work more in planetary magic. And then I have astrologists. Oh, I always have an astrologist and an herb witch in my coven, so I don't have to do it. But I definitely am more attracted to the old classical astrological correspondences because they're more involved with the gods, and more involved with the religiosity of it. So I find that more fascinating, like the Ptolemaic system we were talking about when you had to touch me and inform me that it wasn't those Ptolemies. But
different Ptolemy.
Different Ptolemy, but got that now. But that's all very fascinating. One of the things I've been told repeatedly by occultists is that it's your rising sign that matters most magically. Whether that's a predominant theory or something I've just encountered, is that in your magical walk, it's your rising sign that governs you. I don't know if that's true.
I will say I use I do triad astrology, so I use the ascendant a lot. Like if I'm reading a chart for somebody, that's the first thing I look at, and then whatever planet rules that sign and what it's doing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a common idea. I don't know where it came from.
If I remember from your book, Michael, you use the rising a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just so much. Yeah,
in that one, rising is a very important one. All of them are to a degree in the formula that I ended up creating, but the Venus sign is very important too. I mean, that's the beauty of it all. So
yeah,
when it comes to aesthetic, that is the major one that I kind of focus on the most.
My Venus, mine's in Gemini. So I'm going to pull another one.
Venus.
What was that, Brian?
I believe my Venus is in Venus or something like that.
No, your Venus, I think your Venus.
Venus is in Taurus, sorry.
I think your Venus is in Taurus, which means it's exactly where it wants to be.
Yeah. Same, exactly.
Yeah.
We're blessed with that. And mine, though, it's conjunct my sun, even though my sun is in Aries, but it's only like a 2-degree orb difference. So
I would consider that a
house of witchcraft and occult. So
and
I was always meant to be the glam witch.
And aesthetics, it's like I associate that heavily with aesthetics. Something that's coming up in a couple comments, I'm going to kind of condense into one question. We'll start with Michael. What is the difference between glamour and illusion?
So, okay, I love this question, and I've written about it a lot. So, the type of glamour that I work with, like, I don't necessarily look at it like illusion that starts with an I. Like, I think that's more of the movies and maybe more of like the fairy tales and things like that. I think real, like, practical witchcrafty glamour is an illusion. So where you're alluding to something that exists. Because at the end of the day, you have to be familiar with your audience. If you don't know if your audience doesn't know what you're trying to, present as or glamour, it falls flat. So in order to cast a successful glamour, you have to be aware of that and then allude to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, so that that audience person or whoever can see that. And sometimes the audience is even yourself. If you're casting a glamour on yourself, that's more for self-love or self-empowerment. So the difference, I think that answers the question.
Yeah.
I'd say that in some ways it depends on who is asking it or how they're defining it or what context is being used in. But yeah, any kind of like television or scenario like that, Hollywood stuff, even AI and social media and filters and stuff like that, I would say that glamour and illusion are synonymous. But real, like, witchcrafty glamour, I don't use that term for. Some do, but I don't.
Brian, do you think there's a big difference between illusion magic and glamour magic?
Glamour to me is a bit of a nebulous word, because it sort of encompasses things like illusion and fascination and, different, it's, in my mind anyway. So illusion to me, that can be invisibility. That's an illusion. But because an illusion to me is trying to control a perception or manipulate a perception someone's having. Whereas a fascination is about capturing the attention, the focus of an individual, whether that also then goes into an illusion or a charm or whatever, or a hypnotism, whatever you want to say. I think that it's all sort of a web of what you're talking about. I think Michael's explaining it in a way that sounds practical in occult application, whereas I tend to think about it more in the realms of fairy tales. And if I do push it into this world, it's about what is magic anyway? So, like, what magic isn't, in a way, sort of glamour magic if you think about it in a certain way. So when I talk about glamour magic, I'm putting on the enchantment of the fairy realms because that's my woo, as you were saying, right? In that world. Modern day people who want to pretend they're vampires, 90% of the time they're kind of going into that same sort of idea. They want to be perceived as a vampire. They want to create this illusion of vampirism, and they're trying to fascinate people. And, so it's just intent that goes behind it. But an illusion to me is perception. Glamour can be more than one kind of thing to me. So I think of illusion as being more specific, fascination being more specific. Glamour sort of encompasses that whole thing. But like we were talking about, originally glamour was just another word for putting on a spell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glimmery, right. Yeah, for me, I think I would agree. I think it depends. I would agree with Michael with the whole. It really depends on who's talking, because if somebody's a practicing witch, they're going to use these words a lot more carefully than somebody who's not. If somebody's has no exposure to it. So, yeah, I think it depends on situation. Yeah. So I'm going to pull another one. I'm kind of pulling a couple comments together. We saw your comments again. Thank you. You can call in, but also we see you on Facebook, YouTube. So I'm going to pull a couple of comments together into one question. We can start with Michael again. How does it feel to use so much magic and have such a different personal style, but still live in this world? Like, what is that like? Right? Because we all we all kind of stand out in our own way, right?
We do. Great question. What initially comes to mind, and I'm going to actually kind of go into glamstrology a little bit here. So being someone that has a Gemini midheaven, right? I had mentioned before that that's kind of your natural glamour towards things. Gemini is the twin. And it can also kind of be the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and it can go back and forth. So Gemini has a lot of versatility. So with me and my glamours, I'm very, very I think, versatile in them. I do the glam witch thing where I have the caftans on and all of the magic, I think. But actually, let me back the bus up there. It's like, no matter what outfit or what aesthetic I'm putting together for myself, there's always all the thought that goes into it. There is the planning of it all. And there is magic there. That in and of itself is a little ritual. So I guess for me, it just... It really is about the intention, and just kind of, I see every aspect of life can be magical. It doesn't have to necessarily be let me sit and do the candle working with all of the different herbs and all of those different things. It can be very simple, like even Brian was mentioning in the beginning of the class with the demonstration. So how can I have all of these different things in the world that we're living in? I think that answers the question. Can you say it one more time just so I can make sure I hit it home?
I'm basically saying, like, to be somebody who is portraying magic, I mean, being so different from what is the standard norm, does that cause conflict for you?
Mm-hmm. Is it a conflict for me? Surprisingly, it's not. I would think that I used to think that it would be more. What I tend to see is, when I'm out on the streets and stuff like that, and I'm in my full-on glamorous form and heels and the caftans and things like that, I would expect more, usually people to like look at me in a negative way. But what I get is more of that interestingness. It's that, oh, well, who are you? Oh, this is kind of cool. How did you do this? Oh, I kind of maybe want to do that. And I also tend to see that, and this is maybe my own fears or I guess that's the best word, but I would always maybe be afraid to do it in more of like a straight male, heteronormative type of an environment. But, straight men have always kind of been the ones that compliment me the most. And it's not like a facetious compliment or anything either. So, how do I just, as I've continuously notice that there's more positivity that comes from it, and being someone that is creating beauty in the world around me with my presence and my aesthetic that I put together, I don't necessarily care or worry as much. And maybe that is also just an attribution of, when we think about our intentions and how we manifest them in the world around us, if I'm not calling and thinking about the fear, and I'm just trying to present excitingness and beauty, then that's maybe why I'm not pulling that in.
I get that. Brian, I know you don't live in the real world anymore, but try to think back. Try to think back when you did. Was it a conflict for you being so different?
Time ago, Levi. I stayed in the fairyland too long, and I ate and I drank.
He danced with the women. He ate the food.
I can only relate to this when I am in situations where I'm with people where none of this matters, and I'm always me, but I'm kind of one of those people that I'm diverse because I get bored very easy. So I can wear something that's a bit androgynous and very gay, and I also love nothing better than a really nice suit. So I have different modes of apparatus as far as how I present myself to the world. And it's not based on it's based on my mood.
I relate to that.
Sometimes I want to look like a goddess, it just depends on my mood, so don't worry, everyone. I'm not trying to turn into a goddess for my elderly viewers. So definitely probably not the best choice of words there, but you heard me.
God bless you, Brian.
Anyway, so now that I've flustered myself, what was the question?
So, does it cause conflict with you in the sort of non-magical world?
No, not at all. Because because of the fact that our business life is also witch adjacent. So my religion is witchcraft, my business is witch adjacent. I really don't have a lot of people in my life that aren't involved in some way or very much knowledgeable or appreciative of it. So it's just those very rare occasions. Way back when, when I did work in the Muggle world, I was still in a very alternative atmospheres. So I did have an instance a couple of years ago where I had this very big shocker, and I could totally nerd out and tell you. and you would love it. But I don't think I'm going to do that. But what I will say is that I was in a situation to where no one knew anything about me, and it was through a Discord situation. And I encountered a huge thing of homophobia that I had not encountered since my very young age, and so it was almost alien to me. But I remember it drawing me back to that feeling, and it was very weird. But it wasn't anything to do with witchcraft. So I definitely, I don't really have very many opportunities to experience that anymore. But I do have to relate to people like you. Like I remember when you first came for initiation and training, you used to like to wear your pink button-ups.
Yeah, it's true.
You were all very proper, and on the outside anyway. So, I got to watch that evolve. I got to watch your inner witch blossom, your persona take over into the old nasty occultist that you are today.
I'm doing my best.
You experience it, but not on the level other people do. I'm not a very good example anymore.
Yeah. I grew up in rural Appalachia, so, I have a lot of nasty stories about being in those spaces. But I have to say, as I've gotten older, I kind of really resonate with what you said, Michael, about oftentimes there's this weird feeling. Of course, let me get something out of the way. Homophobia is alive and well. Brian and I are in New Orleans.
Weird experience to experience that. It was actually traumatizing because I was so shocked by it.
Brian and I are in New Orleans. Michael is in Chicago. It's like these are not rural. This is not rural. We don't live in rural America.
Yeah.
And so yes, it's
an online thing. This wasn't anything in my real life, which is why it didn't really have anything to do with me. I didn't even know what I looked like.
But I will say, I really resonate with what you said, Michael. I've discovered a lot of people who are very rigid and are, it's often is straight men, and they are complimentary because it's almost like they're starving for authenticity.
Yeah.
And they're so shut out.
Oh,
Brian, for God's sakes. But yes, I actually have experienced that too, where they're just like fascinated by you because they're like, it's almost like they're dreaming of what it would be like not to be so rigid all the time.
Right. And isn't it interesting too? Because it's like, there are those moments too where it's like, where you can clearly see through an illusion. And it's like, okay, you're just like, the compliment is fake, what I mean? But like I get genuine ones where it doesn't seem like it's fake. And I also want to like piggyback too. It's not that I have never had like a negative comment hurled at me or a nasty look. I mean, that does happen, but I also try not to pay attention to it because, then I give energy to it and it's part of it. I'm just going to continue to be who I am because the alternative is death for me. Like I don't want to have to, what's the right word? Censor myself. In any kind of a way. But I also, there's days, I'm sure you've seen like Instagram stuff like that. Like I wear just shorts and a hat and a t-shirt, there's glamour in that as well. So
yeah. And I think,
just to tie it all back together.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's like what other people think of me is none of my business. Right.
Well, RuPaul says, I know you love RuPaul, Levi, but she says outside of being naked, everything's drag.
Somebody actually has that in the comments. That exact quote. Kismet.
That everything we're doing is some sort of illusionary work.
Ooh, okay. I've got a question that I love in the comments, and I'm going to start with you, Brian, because I'm going to word it differently. Do you think you use glamour sometimes to hide your secret practices? And we can say this in two ways. So, Michael, like magical practices in general, or when it comes to initiatory stuff, Brian, do you feel like you're casting a glamour sometimes to keep things hidden?
I don't think I have to go to that much effort. I think that this is going to sound really mean, but I think that people are so blithely unaware that it's not really difficult to do. However,
I will agree on that.
Yeah.
The glamour that I am doing, I suppose, is Michael was saying something earlier that I can't recapture, but I think he will shout it out to me because you're going to know what I'm going for. I try to insinuate what we're really trying to talk about. I try to project like you said it earlier about something and it was really good and I can't remember now. Sorry.
It's been a long talk. We're fine.
But anyway, the idea is that sometimes I will try to, if somebody asks a question and I can't answer it, I will still turn it into a teaching moment, because there's always something you can talk about, and of course, for instance, I'm going to give Michael as an example tonight. He came on here to do the ambush interview, and he's like, I'm going to make this ambush interview all about me. And I love it. It's smart.
It's smart.
It's smart. It's good. That's what I do. That's what I do. So if I go onto a show and they're talking about general witchcraft or something, I'll just keep bringing the points back to the things that I want to say to the world that I think are important to the world, and so, I do that. In that sense, that's a glamour. I'm trying to fascinate people into being like, pay attention to this. You want to know about witchcraft? I'm giving you more than you think I am with this statement, but do they always glean it? Probably not. I think people know less about witchcraft than they think they do, because it started out as a secret society and it still is one. So, it's there. It's kind of like saying that we all know what's going on with the Masons. Well, maybe we don't want to know because we've seen them riding tricycles with weird hats, but the fact is we know we don't really know what's going on. We've got ideas about things. None of us, some of us have more ideas than others, and Levi and I can attest to this. We both kind of knew some things about initiatory craft before we went in, but there were still lots of surprises, lots of surprises. So it doesn't matter how educated you think you are. If you're not in a secret society, you don't have all the goods. And witchcraft is experiential. Magic is experiential. You could read Michael's book on glamour magic. It's not going to be the same as doing it for 10 years.
Yep.
So,
great response.
Michael, do you use glamour to hide your magical intent?
I have before. That's not usually what my magical intent is. If anything, it's more to, I guess, in some ways, expose it more. So one thing that I've actually kind of learned with glamour, and I've talked about it too, is sometimes, or if anyone's kind of familiar with kind of the basic formula of spellcraft, the idea of like raising power, right? And you do a spell, you do the raising of the power. It's all energy that comes to it. So the way that I kind of will do my witchcraft and spellcraft is, if I'm doing something for it, then I'll go out in a very outrageous outfit that then will cause people to react to it in some kind of way. And those compliments and the people that are constantly coming, oh, I love this outfit, or this looks great, or you look great, that's energy that's feeding into the spell that I've cast. So I'm building it up, and I'm using that energy to then help facilitate what I'm trying to do magically. So there has been moments where I'm trying to like hide and or the magical work, but it's more in your face. And if anything, I'm trying to get more energy to stir it up for myself.
I like that. It's clever. It's very clever, right?
It's
even one of those things where if I am getting a negative response, it's like, it's still energy. Energy is not positive or negative.
Yeah.
So I'm still gaining something from it.
It's a very powerful way. Brian, here's one I'm going to lob your way, and then I'll word it differently for Michael. Have you ever had to remove the illusion that someone has of initiatory craft when they come to you as a student? Like they've built up an image in their head of what it is, and you as a teacher have had to deal with that?
Every time.
It's true. It's so true.
Every time. Blessed be.
Blessed be Brian. Perfect. And what about you, Michael? Have you had to deal with people's illusions or built up images of what you're talking about and had to deconstruct it?
Every day. Yeah, all the time. I mean, even if it's just me in and of itself, because they've seen me out and they already have like an idea of maybe who I am just because of my appearance. But then they talk to me and they're like, oh no, that's not who I thought you were. Or they've talked to me online, or like, we'll even talk about just like dating and online dating and, your profile, and then having to dismantle an illusion that they've created or that they've thought of, about you as well. I think, I have to deal with it a lot every day. Work, coworkers, sometimes even friends and, people that we know.
Parasocial relationships, that's a whole rabbit
Why is
hole.
this a new word all of a sudden? Christian keeps talking about parasocial relationships.
That's an old word. It's like relationships.
I've been hearing it constantly lately.
Like relationships forged on
I've
social
never heard
media.
it, so I like this new term.
It's a term used to describe relationships that are forged like on social media, and people have a sort of enlarged image of how close they are to you because you might have you might have responded to a post of theirs or something, and so they're like, oh, we're really good friends now, right? But it's not
talkers.
Well, parasocial can go that way for sure, but I think
I have parasocial relationships with really hot guys on the internet. Why does it always have to?
Honey, that's not a parasocial relationship. That's just
It could be
being gay in your 40s. I don't know. That's just being gay in your 40s, Brian. I don't know what to tell you. I'm so sorry.
I told you I'm 75 years old.
Oh yeah, he is, people. He's been around since the dawn. He was at Studio 54.
Since the dawn.
This is the dawn of
I think I'm still at Studio 54.
Now that's glamorous.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of glamour, I don't know. So something I want to ask about it is, do you find yourself always having control? We can start with Michael, but do you always think you're in control of it? Or if you've been doing it a lot, can you slip into it sometimes where you're fascinating somebody or engaging in a form of magic without being conscious of it?
Yes, 100%. I think that's, I mean, I can even relate that to just magical practice in general. Like at the point where it's like, you know, having practiced witchcraft for 20 years at this point, I don't always have to necessarily do like a full formulated spell with the candles and the oils and all of that. Now it's just, if I'm just thinking about it and I'm, you know, out getting compliments on an outfit that I'm wearing and that's stimulating the energy, the cycle that's there, it could just happen and it just, you know, comes into life. But yeah, I think with anything, I mean, when you start developing, I mean, I think we all have talents, but we also, you know, we can develop and work on anything as well. And the more we gain experience and we, you know, for lack of a better term, because we talked about it earlier, the more we advance in our studies and live, you know, what you're practicing, it is easier to slip into it. And it's not necessarily like a performance or even a glamour anymore. It's just your life. So, yeah.
Brian, do you find yourself slipping into fascination sometimes with people?
Like I'm being fascinated by them?
Or no, you're doing it to them without like, or are you always conscious of it?
Right? It's like, yeah.
But are you always conscious of it is what I'm asking.
Do you know, I think I am mostly conscious of it. So consciousness is something that I still strive for. And I think it's probably why I have a tendency, and I think you could probably vouch for this, Levi, to run from fans.
Yeah.
I don't really like, I run, I see them, I run, you know, because it's, you know, that if it's in an environment to where I'm teaching or something like that, that's one thing, but just complete admiration, you know, that's, it's a bit strange sometimes. I think I try to be conscious of it. I probably am not always conscious of it, you know,
Okay.
But I think I am fairly conscious of that effect that fame perceive. I mean, first of all, I'm a famous witch, which is like being a famous janitor. You know,
Girl.
If you're not in the world, you're not famous.
We
right?
have a call, by the way.
Exactly.
We do have a call, but before I answer it, I want to say it so reminds me of a time. I can't remember what was going on when Christian was talking about how many Facebook fans he had, and Ellie just looks over at me and very calmly explains that she had a client who the only thing she did is teach people how to thread their eyebrows, and she had 1 million followers. And it was just sort of like a wake-up call, right?
Kinds of things. There's no one in the occult that's that famous. You know, there's still people, and like not in considering to what fame can be. You know, there's a million people around today who do not know who Aleister Crowley is.
Yeah, the kids don't know anybody anymore.
And he's probably the most famous occultist there ever has been. You know, Laurie Cabot was on Oprah. Most people don't know who she is. You know, if you're not in this world, you don't know. So yeah, I'm famous.
Yeah.
Or infamous, as the case may be.
I'm going to answer this call. So, one sec. Hi, you're on Covendom. Can you hear me?
Is this me?
Yes, it's you. Oh my God.
Oh, we can hear it.
Oh.
I can't hear.
Yeah.
Let him on.
Well, I put my name in there, so I figured you'd say the name of the caller. That way,
It came up as Christian J, and I thought it was like, well, that can't be. So I thought it was somebody else. My mind slipped.
Oh, weird. Well, anyway, parasocial relationships. No, my shrink told me that
Christian, you
parasocial
have a question.
relationships. Huh?
You're not on the show, Lucy. Do you have a question?
I do. So my shrink told me that parasocial relationships, like these people, if you go on Twitter and they're talking about the housewives, they all, New Jersey or whatever, and they all feel like they're in each other's lives. Like, honey, why don't you tell your husband, type of thing.
Sure.
And, because I don't know them. So I'm curious. My question is, because you're all public figures, you're all, obviously if you're using glamour magic, you're trying to create a persona.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find that becomes an obstacle when your glamour is coming up against these egregores created by people with parasocial relationships?
So, are you saying, Christian, the persona we're trying to put forward in the world versus what gets created out of our hands online?
Like
right,
you,
because it does become a form of glamour. Like it's a form of glamour for you.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Like it's created for you.
So, Michael, how do you deal with that? The egregore of people's perception of you online and these parasocial relationships?
Well, on one hand, I tend not to check any of my DMs. So that's just a practical way of it. I just ignore it unless it's someone I know in the real world. But just even online and comments and stuff like that, I love it. I lean into it because, again, like I had mentioned before, I just see that all as additional energy that can help fuel the magic that I'm trying to work with. At the end of the day, it's important for me to remain an authentic to myself and to still kind of, I guess, I don't know, that's kind of actually, it's a great question. And I'm a little bit stumped on it because on one hand, I was like, I want to make sure that I personally know who I am. So I always know I'm in control of the situation. But at the same time, we also can't necessarily control the illusion that we create in somebody else's mind, that they've created for us, which I think is the purpose for it. The best way I can say it is I don't know. I lean into it and I don't get upset by any of it. I don't take it too seriously. I let them enjoy whatever that illusion is that they've created in their mind about me. And if it is something that I feel is it's dangerous in some kind of a way, it's skewing it the wrong way or something like that, then I'll correct it. Or if it's just something that's negative and they just want to be an ass for the right of being an ass, then it just gets deleted and blocked. So that's how I handle it.
Curation. I love that. Brian, what about you?
Oh, that's a beautiful way of saying it. Yeah.
Well, I'm very good, like Michael is, at ignoring people.
You have to.
I suffer. I'm blessed with just enough narcissism to not be too obsessed with what other people are thinking. However, also, and this could be delusion. This could be delusion on my part. I'll throw that
Illusion and delusion. I love it.
I think that the way I'm perceived by people who like me and people who don't like me is still consistently the same. They just like it, they don't like it. I don't think people have a different idea of me other than the Alexandrian high priest with the pseudo British accent. They either like it or they hate it. It's not I don't feel like it's ever inconsistent. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people have all these weird thoughts about me. One person did think I was like an older woman once. That was weird. And
all
they
in time.
took a picture of my eye and a picture of this older woman's eye, and they were posting them to say we were the same person. I don't know how I got into that fat suit or out of it, but it was a weird thing. But that's just a crazy person. But I think most of the time it's the people who are thinking about me in that way, it's usually revolving around initiatory craft or because I'm married to Christian, and they don't like Christian, or I'm married to Christian, they do like Christian, so those are the two two kinds of people that I have in my life in the fame game are either because they're fans of my husband or enemies of my husband, or because they're fans of me or they're enemies of me. But I think my fans and enemies all still think of me as the Alexandrian, either the Alexandrian servant of the goddess or the other kind of Alexandrian.
I don't have nearly as much presence. I am very careful about how much presence I give to that. I think I don't struggle with this as much, frankly, Christian, because I'm a niche. Like if you are, I just am a niche. I'm kind of like the crazy religious witch, who's out here like constantly.
You do get the blessing and banes of association with us.
Sure.
You do get that.
I do. Yeah. And I don't. Here's what I'll say, and I'm going to get a little maybe controversial here. It is common knowledge that I think I'm a little bit more left of center than a lot of people in this conversation. But Christian, something that cancel culture has done that I do not appreciate at all is it has created this almost sort of warped Calvinist Christian reality where there are sinners now. And everybody, and they're evil. They've always been evil. They cannot be redeemed. If you associate with them, you're evil. All guilt is now by association, and there's no salvation. Outside of the elect, we have martyrs now in this movement. I don't like that, and I think that there is a sort of image that is portrayed sometimes where if I, because I know, Brian and Christian, or because I've taught at Hexfest or whatever, people can get snappy, and I'm always like, yeah, but I've met you in real life, some of these people. And talking about, taking it back to what Michael's talking about, which is glamour, I think a lot of people on social crusades on the internet have convinced themselves through their own glamour that they are divine servants of retribution. And that is an unhealthy thing to be. That is just an unhealthy thing to be. And at the end of the day, they're often just as mean and nasty as the people they're criticizing. If your whole life is about criticism, you're probably unhappy.
The new agey people. But the new agey people, they're the worst.
Yeah, exactly. Like the sort of
love and light.
The love and light crowd can be the meanest people on earth, right? It's like there's a thing I read. There's a meme.
No, run a psychic
you.
fair. Just run a psychic fair. You will find out.
But I will say there's a meme. There's a meme I love going around right now that says people like the metal scene and the hippie scene, right? Musically. And it said, metalheads are really nice people pretending to be mean people, and hippies are really mean people pretending to be nice people. And I think a lot of New Agers are that latter category, where it's like their kindness is a cosplay. Like,
they're trying to redeem themselves.
Correct. It's like a form of self-redemption. At the end of the day, we're all just getting through it.
Themselves, you're very nice.
Yeah, like if you're constantly trying to tell the world, it's like a failed glamour, Michael. It's like, it's a failed glamour. Yeah. I'm a nice person, and I've got to keep saying that until you believe it. And it's like, well, if nobody's...
Remember, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Christian, hold your...
I don't try.
So, what about narcissist? Glamouring yourself.
Ooh.
You're married to one.
I know. I'm not narcissist. I'm a bit of a narcissist.
I said you're married to one.
And you don't have enough pride to be a narcissist.
You care too much what other people think, Christian.
What the hell is that? What the hell is that shade?
I've seen you at the airport in your sweatpants. Have you ever seen me go to the airport in sweatpants and weird flip-flops? No. Because you're not really a narcissist. You have narcissistic tendencies, so do I, but they're about different things. You're absolutely narcissistic about your...
I love how Michael and I have just wandered into a marital dispute.
I'm not a fashion whore. I have some pretty... excuse me, I got some pretty expensive outfits, I'll have you know. And my just one stick of...
Girls, you're both pretty.
I don't wear drugstore makeup. Not for nothing. I've even recommended a palette to Michael over there. Does he still use?
You want to know what I'm wearing right now? This is actually very interesting, since witchcraft and makeup tutorials are somehow actually linked. This is the real Egyptian coal. It's burnt frankincense. Ooh. Hopefully I don't get an infection. No, it's burnt frankincense. It's burnt frankincense with olive oil, and I'm trying it out. It's a bit messy. I don't know that I'd wear it often, but I wanted to try
I
it.
like Laurie Cabot's way of saying it. The black over your eyes draws in light and helps us absorb the energies of the universe.
Of course it does.
Thank
You for calling in, Christian.
Blessed be.
Blessed be. Bye.
Good to hear from you. Bye.
I do want to
He's
take,
over it, though, isn't he?
but I do want to ask your question though, because it was a good question, Brian.
No, it dawned on me because the word narcissist, and I thought of the pool, and he looked at himself and felt. I mean, that's a glamour. If you think you're so beautiful that you fall in love with yourself.
Yeah. Do you think narcissists are using glamour, Michael?
I think they can. I think
You glamour yourself is more of a question.
I think that's one of those weird ones where it's like I want to say we kind of had mentioned it before. You know, Brian did in some of our earlier questions that I had, where it's just like there are these people that kind of just have that natural charisma or that natural narcissism, or that's just a natural thing that they have. I think that narcissists are so involved in themselves that they're not going to like kind of do the work to like behind the glamour of glamoring yourself. So yeah, I mean, maybe it could just be like an unconscious glamour, absolutely. But I don't think that they're actually doing the real magic to manifest it for themselves.
Ego, really, isn't it? Probably narcissists. You know, falling for your own ego, falling for your own BS. Basically. Do we have any other questions, Levi?
Let me scroll back. That whole call, there was a couple things piling through it, so let me check.
Cool.
I think for me though, I'll answer while I'm looking that
my husband can turn any situation into a therapy session.
Correct. I think narcissists, at the end of the day, the difference for me is that every narcissist I've ever met who's severely one, not because we throw that word around so much nowadays, but we've all met like a couple who we really can give that category to. They're often the most miserable people I've ever met.
Yeah.
They're never happy.
They don't have that, that like, and I hate this term because I just feel like it's been so like love and lighted to death, but like they don't have the self-love. They don't have that even emotional depth or emotional intelligence within themselves that like the glamour for it to work. You know what I mean? Like in the context of glamour magic and kind of like what I do at least.
They just don't have it.
Yeah, they just don't have it. They're miserable, and that's it. They're projecting that evil. So that that could be part of the glamour. They're glamoring. They're becoming a mirror to the negativity that they have.
Yeah, I think you can convince. I think people can. Ego, is its own thing, but they can fall for their own delusions. These words are all connected for a reason.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's illusion versus delusion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Narcissists are delusion.
I have a question I'm dying to ask that popped into my head because of this conversation. Have you ever noticed, this is a very millennial thing, like it's very much my generation is obsessed with this, where they talk bad about themselves constantly, and that's like, have you ever seen people almost hurt themselves through like negative glamour, where they're like always talking down to themselves, always saying, oh, I'm crazy, it's because I'm crazy, it's because I'm this. It's almost like talking yourself into difficult situations. Do you see that, Michael, with people? Like it's like bad
absolutely
glamour.
with so much of it. It's like even for some reason you saying that just reminds me of something that I was having a conversation with someone the other day, where it's like, oh well, no, I'm not pretty enough to get a date or da da da. Then it's like you are literally creating this misery around you right now. It's just with your own negative self-talk. Like that's especially I think for witches and magical practitioners, because we are so ingrained with what do we all always hear? It's our intentions. It's that's what creates the change. That's what creates that's our will behind everything. So if you're constantly negative and you're constantly down on yourself, and you are practicing witchcraft to a degree, like you're only going to keep manifesting that in your life.
Do you see that with people, Brian? Like self-destruction?
Well, like he's saying, when you're practicing magic, right? You're practicing psychic work or whatever it is. I think we've all by now been exposed to The Secret, that made a video. There is something to that, they don't have the whole story, but if you're generating negativity, you're attracting negativity, and if you're generating positivity, you're attracting positivity. Like both those things are going to happen anyway. So I'm not trying to be like, if you just think love, 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 everything's gonna be great. Like, no, it's not that simple.
Yeah, of course.
Like, yes, for challenges, life has challenges. We're all going to have horrible things happen to us. We all are, and we're all going to have great things happen to us. There's a reason why we're in this sphere, is to learn and grow and experience it together. Perhaps we are the fallen angels. So I think that in this sense, I think people though can create their own heaven and hell in this world, because if you are generating negativity, whether it's on the inner planes, on the outer planes, in your mind, in your heart, wherever we want to put this, well, you're creating it for yourself, and it's easier for it to get in. Yeah. It's going to get in anyway. Like, you could sit there generating all the positivity you want. Negative stuff's going to come in anyway because it's supposed to. There has to be balance. But why would you fill up the entire pool with pee? It's like some kid's going to piss in it eventually, sure, but you don't want the whole thing to be pee.
A beautiful deep metaphor. I would say I agree with both of you.
But one everyone could understand.
I'm very iffy about New Age language, but I will say
I don't like the language either.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so perfect example without calling anyone out, Levi. Like, I know people who, when they're in a bad mood, they have a bad day.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say.
No, I totally agree. I think it's important to realize that what I think Michael's talking about with Glamour, what Brian was just talking about, we're obviously not talking about things like oppression, or violence. It's not. What we're talking about is psychological. I do think that you can talk yourself into, some pretty dark places sometimes, and it's almost become a badge of honor to be miserable in certain culture, in amongst the culture right now. And I've engaged in that before, because it's just my generation, my culture, we're like that. It's that sort of self-deprecating, cynical, it's got a lot of social traction right now to be that way. But I've had some revelations recently where I'm like, oh, this is damaging though. This is a very dangerous glamour to play on yourself, where it's like you do it for the lulz and it's funny to be so self-deprecating, but eventually you just start believing it. And I think that's super unfortunate that it's so wildly popular right now to be self-deprecating to the point of self-destruction. I agree with you, Brian. We all have that person in our life who
Thankfully, I'm not that. So.
No, but we all have that person in our life, like Brian's talking. They just decide to be miserable, right?
I just think it's just life's too short. Do your stuff. So we are on the last few minutes of the show. So I want to plug Michael again. And so, Michael, I do believe you've written more than 2 books, but the ones that I know
a lot.
Yeah, I'll let you speak about them. But I remember Glamour Magic. Am I saying it
right?
Glam
Witch.
The Glam Witch. Yeah, the first one is Glam Witch. It was the documentation of my practice as a witch with Glamour Magic and Lilith. I have 2 books on moon magic. There's the complete book of moon spells for beginners. I have a book on love spells, a book on witchcraft for daily self-care. I have another one that's called Glam Craft that came out last year. It was a limited edition hardcover release. I think there's only 10 left in existence. So my website, www.theglamwitch.com, has links to that. And then, we have Glam Astrology now. So, and 2 more that are being written. So
fabulous.
And where can people purchase your books?
Through my website is the best area. So Amazon, they're on Amazon, except that limited edition hardcover. That's the only one that has to go through the site.
What's your website, Michael?
What was that?
What is your website? You know the
www.theglamwitch.com.
Perfect.
So if you probably put in glamwitch.com, you'll probably find his website.
Yes.
That's amazing.
You Google the Glam Witch, I'll come up.
I know you're going to be at HexFest. How can people find you and reach out to you outside of HexFest? And what are you teaching at HexFest? What's going on there?
Yeah, so at HexFest, I'm doing so I have the Lilith meditation, and I'm going to be doing another one on Aphrodite and the 5 mysteries of desire. And then another class that's going to be looking at the paradox between Lilith and Aphrodite. From a magical standpoint, artistic standpoint, even astrological standpoint, because there's Lilith in astrology as there's Venus. So it'll be an interesting one. And how you can find me and reach out to me, I'm very active on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, I'm just Michael Herkes, and Instagram is at the.glam.witch.
Perfect.
And it has a blue check mark, so it's the real me. And there's not any more imposters, since I've probably had the most imposters of anyone in the span of 2 years, back when that all started.
I remember.
Michael, have you done any other festivals besides Hexfest? Do I want to ask? I don't know.
No, I don't. Wait.
You've been going to Hexfest? How many years have you been now?
Hexfest. What was that? I'm sorry.
I said, how many years have you been doing Hexfest now? It's been a while.
I came to Hexfest in 2017. That was my first one. And then I've come to every one of them except 2 years ago. And this is my third time presenting. I'm so excited. I love Hexfest. That's really kind of where I got my start in all of this. So it's always my favorite place to come.
Festival. I really think people go there for New Orleans. I think they go there because New Orleans is such a magical city. It's very hot at that time of year, but it's worth it. And we're mostly...
It is.
It is.
But I'm very excited. I'll be seeing you very soon. Thank you for coming on the show. We'd love to have you back in the future. And
Absolutely.
May all the glamour of Lilith be.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right. For the rest of you, we will be back next Sunday with Papa Cap. I think that's the name we're going by. Papa Cap is a magician and an Alexandrian witch who makes magical products and was once a member of the OTO. And we'll let him sort of plug his things. But he is an exceptional hermetic magician and very strange. So if you like the bizarre, make sure to be here next Sunday. I have no idea what the interview will be. Anyway, thank you again, Michael. Thank you, Levi. And Lily will be back next week. She's never missed an episode. It just couldn't be helped. And with what happened last week, I didn't want to postpone. So, because we weren't able to. You were the first episode. It was supposed to be, you were supposed to be the second, but you were actually the first because we couldn't get online. So,
thank you, Michael.
Back for the third episode.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'll see you at Hexfest, Michael. Thank you, Levi.
See you in a couple weeks.
See you soon.